Hi, good evening, everybody. This is Amy Register with Ask a Christian. I'm not even doing the 2-minute countdown today because I had 2 people message me this week and say, Amy, your video is not working. And I said, there's like a 2-minute music lead in. Did you get past that? And they said, no, I didn't get past it. And that was the problem. And since it happened to 2 people, I'm just not going to do the music lead in anymore. If you show up, you show up. If you get pinged, you get pinged. And if you don't, you don't, and that's okay. So thank you for joining me. A lot of these past conversations, I have been busting up in the middle of the interview and giving a little commentary. I'm going to hold myself back today because, frankly, our guest today was so interesting that I didn't want to interrupt him. Everybody had been telling their stories, in like 5 to 8 minutes. But this young man took about 15 or 16 minutes. So I'm just going to let that whole first part play. That's what you're going to get up front. You're going to get my new friend, Kaleb Eisele, telling you about some of the reasons the church had become irrelevant, why he left the church, some of the problems. He's basically the poster child for exactly what I wanted to talk about in this conversation. So I'm just going to let him tell his story, and then you'll see me on the interview ask a couple of questions. So I may wrap up with some finishing thoughts just to put a little extra oomph in it. But I really just want you to be able to hear Kaleb. So let me cue this up. And if you have any questions, if you want to talk about anything during this, I will be seeing your comments there on the side. So definitely feel free to leave some comments. And I will get to them at the end if I see anything that is relevant to the discussion. All right, here's a video file. And Kaleb's going to introduce himself and a little bit of the story of his life. My friends, thank you so much for joining us today. I have Kaleb Eisele with me today. Kaleb, I'm hoping that you'll give people a little bit of your background, let them know why you have a unique perspective on the topic we're going to get into today. Will you introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and how you come about your unique perspective?
Yeah, my name is Kaleb Eisele. I live in Portland, Oregon, land of 1,000 disasters in a single year. We've been in national news for all kinds of things, heat waves and ice storms and power outages and protests for a year now. But my job is really cool. I'm a content creator, so I am self-employed to make things for the internet. And I have a very specific area that I work in, and that is life stories of Seventh-day Adventists. That shows up in a lot of different ways. So you may see a photo and kind of text stories that get shared around Facebook or Instagram. But I also do a lot of work with documentary filmmakers and podcasters and all kinds of different projects where I need to facilitate discussion with people about their life experiences. So that's what I'm really good at, what I love doing. I've interviewed over 500 Adventists in about 4 years. But yeah, definitely where I came from was deeply embedded culture of Adventism. I would like to talk about the spiritual side also, but you have to understand that Adventism is almost an ethnicity. So where my life begins is within that culture in the deep, deep South in absolute poverty. So when I was born, my parents were, I think my dad was maybe 23, 24, and my mom had just turned 21 when I was born. And we lived in a little trailer house that had just gotten running water and electricity before I was born. And so, a combination of socioeconomic factors affected how I grew up, but also Adventism was kind of the pattern of life. So imagine beyond going to church, we go to church on Saturdays, right? It's our Sabbath. add in lots of different things. We cook Friday before sundown, before the Sabbath starts. We eat vegetarian food only. We have evening worship together every day. There are things that you do on Sabbath and things you don't do, things you talk about, things you don't talk about. There's midweek prayer meeting where you get together with other people at your church and sing worship songs and have a devotional thought. So it's a very tight-knit community, but it's also a very, in some parts of the world, at least where I grew up, very regimented thing. Because you're so deeply embedded in this community, you care a lot what people think. You do a lot of things that you aren't necessarily fully studied on because other people are doing them. I think of movies and books that people would read or watch. You would actually be shamed for different ones, or even kicked out of school for bringing them to class. So that was the world that I kind of was born into. But when I was 6 years old, my parents got divorced. And we had moved from the South to the Midwest to this much bigger area, much bigger church. And divorce in my church was very frowned upon. It was not something that was done lightly. It was something that you had to have, you almost had to stand in front of the church and prove why you were doing it in order for people not to have some kind of social backlash. And so immediately my very strict religious upbringing is shattered. My parents both marry people within a year who have never heard of this Seventh-day Adventist church in their life, never met one. My mom goes from the person who's, baking bread Friday and lighting a candle and turning on worship music to no longer believing in God for the next 2 decades. And my dad and new stepmother become my primary caregivers. So, that was shaky in the family aspect, but what happened to me was I was put in Adventist school, where I, had worship every morning, chapel time, church on Saturday, all through first through 12th grade of life. You have worship corporately with your school and then your church every day. So while my family life kind of moved away from especially the more legalistic and rigid Adventism, I did not. All of my friends were Adventist until after high school. I remember in college trying pepperoni. I was out like at Pizza Hut on my own, and I felt super rebellious because I was trying pork, which is a thing traditionally not eaten by Adventists. I remember even watching I think a TV show on Saturday as an adult for the first time and thinking how different and alien that felt to me. So that's the upbringing, right? And follow my family back as far as you want, back to almost the beginnings of Adventism, and you will find somebody meeting a literature evangelist at their door, early 1900s, maybe late 1800s, and coming to a Revelation seminar and learning about the end of the world and deciding I'm going to bring my whole family and we're going to convert to Adventism. So I'm generation, I don't even know, 5, 6. You can walk down my old Adventist high school and find my great-grandparents on the wall, their alumni pictures.
Wow.
My grandparents, my parents, and my wife and I, all at the same school. So that's the setting, right?
So your heritage as a human and your heritage as an Adventist are pretty close to the same thing.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. I would add in, I grew up in a very white area, very blue collar and politically conservative area. There are other aspects of how my view of God was formed that come from the larger society I was raised in, for sure. The Midwest, it's very industrial, very hard work. And if it's a weekday and it's not nighttime, you should be working at all times. worked on a farm, construction, like all of these different hands-on things. And so that shaped me too, quite a bit. And it's very different from, my daily reality today, for sure.
Yeah. If people haven't heard much about this denomination, which by now, if they've been hanging out with me for the series, we've had several Seventh-day Adventists on here, and some of you guys know that that's the church that I most associate with. But if you haven't heard much about it, this picture you're painting can seem to those on the outside very cultish, very insular. Maybe would be a slightly kinder way to say that. And it might remind people of what they know about Mormons or what they know about Judaism. Maybe there's some overlap there in people's minds. But what our topic is about today is some of the things you've been talking about just seem completely foreign and irrelevant and even not helpful to a lot of Protestant Christians or people outside of any faith community. They're hearing this and they're just saying like, oh my goodness, I feel for you, kid. So do you finish telling the story a little bit? Like,
yeah,
where did you go from there? Did you like it? Did you leave it? What was it?
So for everybody who is thinking what you're saying, that same thing is happening to us as Seventh-day Adventists. We are also saying like, hey, why do we do the things that we do? Like, why are we like this? Is this God saying this, or is this our church and our culture have just developed to a point where it's very, like almost like regulated, almost enforced by our other church members. And in some areas, for sure, like it's definitely felt much stronger in certain areas than others. I can say that as somebody who's lived in the Midwest, the South, Pacific Northwest. It does vary quite a bit.
Yes.
But for me, I stopped going to church when I got married when I was 20 years old. Moved to a new area where I didn't know anybody. I didn't have that established family connection to my church anymore. I didn't have any friends at my new church. And so I really kind of got to go into a new Adventist community, even as a Seventh-day Adventist myself, and kind of experience what it's like being the new person. And it was rough. It was really rough. I mean, at the time, I'm driving this car that keeps overheating in the middle of the road. I'm making barely any money, working full time, trying to go to school. I had dropped out of college because I couldn't afford it. I was back in college again. I'm trying to, get to all of these different responsibilities in my life, and desperately broke. And so people didn't know it, but just to get the 30 minutes from my house to the church in this car, paying for gas, was a huge responsibility. It was a weight on me. And I was doing it because I believed I should be there. There was some piece of me that felt obligated to go to church. But, it wasn't too long before I always tell people the kind of tipping point for me. I had been in that church for, I want to say, a year or more, and hadn't really made any deep connections. I had talked with the pastor. I'm like, hey, this is our situation. And he's like, oh, we should go to pizza and we should talk about your life. I'm like, yeah, I would love pizza. Like, that sounds amazing. You want to take me out for food? Like, we're super broke. And I was like, when? And he's like, I don't know. We'll do it sometime. I'm like, oh, okay. Right. It was like the next week or the week after. I was like, hey, do you still want to go for pizza? He's like, oh, we should do pizza. I'm like, okay, when? Like, I'm free Tuesday. Are you free Tuesday? He's like, oh no, I can't do Tuesday. But there was never, like, it happened to me 3 times, and there was never follow through. Right. It was like, oh, you offered this thing to somebody in need and then you just kind of just didn't deliver. And, that kind of got me jaded a bit. But then I was sitting at potluck. I didn't bring anything to potluck because I didn't have anything to bring. I was there because I needed food. And I'm sitting there and someone comes by, one of the elders, and puts a list in my face, and it's responsibilities for the church.
Mm.
And he tells me, you've been here for a long time and you're not contributing at all. I need you to sign up for something.
Wow.
And I just remember breaking inside because I couldn't take on one more thing. The weight of a new marriage and trying to go through school and living in a new place and driving this car that won't work, and just not having money for anything, my bills hardly, let alone, taking an entire day off of work to come to the work bee. Working Sundays too, barely carving out the time to go to church and hopefully get a precious nap in before I go back to my overfull life. And I couldn't be there anymore. Aside from that, we were very heavy on programming, and yet as I went back to this secular college, I'm seeing these humanist groups, these secular humanist groups that are reaching out to their community. They're helping people pay their light bill. They're helping students who are homeless find food to eat and showers. And, they're doing so much good, like meaningful good for the people around them. And then I go to church and I'm like, well, what are we doing? Great. We're getting together on Thursday to sing Christmas songs. Okay. I'm not against that. But like, our schedule was so packed with things made for us, and there was so little room and money and time and care for anybody else that I came to this conclusion, and right or wrong, I felt for a long time that going to church was actually an obstacle to my relationship with God and people. Going to church was a waste of my time. It was actively against what I believed, and that was that I should spend my Sabbath doing good and resting. And I was doing neither, I felt. I even our money, there were things I felt like we spent to do that were really good for our little program there that didn't touch anybody. There were a lot of inefficient ways that we did things where we could do something online, but instead we're spending thousands of dollars on paper material. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's what we're used to.
Mm-hmm.
When that money, like I knew as a broke person what that money could mean to a family or a person. So this combination of things, I retained many of my Adventist beliefs. I do not believe there's an everlasting hell. For example, I believe that our health matters. I believe in the idea of a Sabbath, taking one day every week and setting it aside for worship, family, and rest. So I retained those things, but I just didn't see a point in going to church. Like that's a separate thing to me. There's your beliefs, there's your spirituality, and there is church attendance, which is a program. And I saw no need for the program. Mm-hmm. I was like, why? The Bible doesn't even tell me to do this. It says, don't forsake fellowship with like-minded believers. And I looked around my church and I was like, where are the like-minded believers?
Oh, boom.
Where? Show me one. And I couldn't find them. So what was I forsaking? Not what the Bible says. I was forsaking what the church said I should do. Mm-hmm. But I kind of felt like, who cares? Like, I don't work for you. Like, I don't owe you anything. It is my choice. And I felt like if I were ever to go back to church, I would have to go back to somewhere that I felt zero obligation to go. Like, I want to go because I want to go.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I'll just jump in here and say hi to those of you who have joined just in the last few minutes. That was such a powerful thing. I couldn't help but coming in to say, did you guys hear that part about the food when he really could have used a meal? I mean, this is not a guy who's, trying to hide the fact that he doesn't have money, but he sure doesn't want to brag about, not having it at that time, broadcast it. And he really, really, really could have just used somebody to come through with a bite of food. Like, that moves me. Let us cast our eyes around us and just see, is there someone who could just benefit from the fellowship of a meal, especially if they are asking and reminding you? Like, let that be a prompt for our hearts. I mean, that's just a good friend thing to do, isn't it? And then you heard some of the things that he was objecting to. I bet you've been there. I've been there. Why do churches spend their money in these certain ways? Why do they highlight programs over people? Some of these are ongoing questions that I've had and that you probably had. And if you have other things, I would love to know about them. I would love to know what you are personally struggling with when it comes to church attendance versus, seeking God, seeking relationship with God. And you also notice that I titled this whole interview after that segment because he said at one point he felt like coming to church was actually hurting his relationship with faith and with God. So definitely things for us to think about as we think about our place in this world, our place in our community. I'll carry on with the interview here. Sometimes you really just need someone to show up for a piece of pizza. Like, we don't have any clue what just brushing people off could do to them if it were in the wrong time, or what inviting someone to eat could do for us at just the right time. Like this, I'm an evangelist. What I do is I seek to introduce people to the divine. And a lot of it, even in the Bible, starts with food and loving people. And people think that they can't do evangelism. Christians think I could never, introduce the concept of what I believe. It's too personal or weird or whatever. But like, can you take somebody to eat? Can you check in with them and make sure that they've had something nice to eat this week? And I know people who are great at this, but man, that got me in the heart.
So it's funny. God, throughout the Bible, he uses repeated symbols, right, and imagery. And in my life, literally, one of the main pillars of my story is the symbolism of pizza. Pizza has come back time and again as a symbol of care and of seeing somebody. And it's not the food, obviously, it's the carved out time and effort and intentionality. It's funny because, years later I come back to church, and when do I decide to come back to church? It's when a pastor with no pressure on me, no hope that I'm going to come back that I could see, no sales pitch, just again and again shows up near where I'm working and says, if you're not in church, I'll come to you and we can go get pizza. And he didn't even know. But I had a pastor and a church family show up and bring the church to me time and time again before I ever was willing to come back.
Wow. So, Kaleb, what do you think it is about the way Christianity presents itself and how we do church and what we think church is? What is it about how Christianity presents the necessities of church that is so off-putting for millennials and Gen Z? We know that people are leaving the church. We know that they have said irrelevant in all these polls, these Barna polls. But what do you think it is?
Yeah. I work with local churches fairly often. And the question when it comes to like my generation and younger, the question is always like, why are young people leaving the church, or why won't they come to church? Mm-hmm. And I always turn it and ask them like, okay, stop thinking that. Start thinking, why would they be here?
Yes.
Right. Why would they be here? What would cause somebody in their early stages of life to commit to coming to church? Because if you take away the obligation, like a lot of our older generations, like, yes, they love their church, but they also feel a deep duty to attend. Like they feel a commitment to attend. Mm-hmm. That's gone. For a lot of us, that's gone. We don't attend or even stay at, I mean, it's beyond church. It's company loyalty, right? Mm-hmm. Businesses are having to, rethink like, okay, people aren't just going to stay because they have a job here. Well, they used to offer a lot more to people, right? Mm-hmm. To this generation, are we communicating in a way that people relate to, right? Are we talking about things that they care about? Mm-hmm. Are we even orchestrating our whole idea of church in a way that they can find meaningful? And I don't know that a heavily programmed music from generations and generations older, it's not that people can't relate to that, but is there something in there that feels like it was made with them in mind?
Mm-hmm.
And is that just one little piece? Have you just kind of thrown them an electric guitar or a smoke machine? Like, is there something deeper and meaningful that's actually engaging with their questions of how we treat the planet, how we treat other people? These big ideas like, what do I do with my life? Those kinds of things are so lacking, I think, in how we do church, that I think it really takes approaching from the outside and saying, well, why would I be here?
Mm-hmm.
And a great exercise for this. So I need everyone to imagine a religion that they can't be converted to, right? I've had several conversations with my siblings in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, right? I have spent a lot of time with them.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing in me that is willing to accept what they're saying, right? So think about, like, what would get me to go to church with them? What would get me to be involved with them? Well, there's something deeper and far more powerful than what they're saying, and that's how they live. The most compelling times when I've been like, they've got something there, have been in times when I see them serving, and they do serve, and they serve often and well in my community. Those times I say, I see something that's beyond humanity, something that's not selfish, that's happening here. And I'm actually drawn to that more than somebody just like being like, well, it says right here in this book you don't believe in. Yeah, who cares? Like, that's not convincing to me. But we don't take that perspective and then apply it to ourselves. We don't think, okay, well, I'm talking to somebody who hasn't accepted the things I've accepted. I'm talking to people who, could take or leave, or are actively against certain parts of this. What is compelling about what's going on here, though? And the key missing ingredient, even for young Adventists trying to relate to a church that was not created for them, the key element that's missing is care. Care for other people and care for the planet. I think you can really, all of our social issues come down to it. All of our ways we spend money and how we think about work. I mean, it all comes down to care. And when you say, no, I care a lot more by ignoring what people want and caring for their salvation only, that's not even the model of Jesus, in my opinion. Something that really drew me, and why I have never let go of Jesus when I have let go of church attendance, is that there's something compelling about who he was as a human. Before we ever get into the supernatural, the belief of creation, the existence of God, Jesus the human inspires me. How he did humanity, how he interacted with people. You go through and make a list of all of the different people that Jesus interacted with, that his disciples said no, or tried to get in the way of, or tried to stop. It's children, it's women, it's Samaritans, all kinds of different people. And every time Jesus says, I got this, get out of the way, let me see this person, let me interact with this person. That's the kind of human that I want to be. And from there, I think, okay, there's something better than what I see in this world right now. There is a force and something, a source of things that is far greater than what I'm seeing in everyday life. And I see that source when I see kindness and care. There's little glimpses of, I believe, God. And it doesn't matter. It's the same thing that I had a real problem with when I was seeing God at work through atheist hands, and not through Adventist hands. Every piece of care, every piece of love and healing, I believe, comes from this source that is God. I take this idea that God is love so literally. I believe that God is a person, but I believe that love is the character and existence of God, and that everything else deviated from that. So what's missing? It's care. It's the Spirit of God. I do believe, I mean, I don't know if most people know this, the Adventist Church is approaching a time when something like 60% of our leadership have been in positions for a long, long time and are eligible to retire or will pass away within the next 5 to 10 years. So the church will change. I would love for it to change willingly, but I have no doubt it's going to change. And this is part of, my decision to be involved again, is that I see the present as temporary. And I see a whole lot of beautiful things that could happen in the future.
I don't know if that is scary to those of you watching or exciting to those of you watching. I just typed in the comments, he's saying the Adventist church is aging. The Adventist church will change. That's Christianity in North America, in the Western world at least. There's still pockets of like evangelical and Protestant churches, of course, growing even in the United States and definitely overseas. But for the most part, the next generation is going to be rising up. And so Kaleb says he's coming back because he knows that where we're stuck is temporary and there are new things on the horizon. So for me, that makes me feel good because some of the things that I would love to see implemented, I know I actually have a shot at moving church and church community beyond the walls of a building and getting back into the community where I think kind of like the early Christian movement was hanging out. And yes, it was for different reasons, like they were persecuted and didn't have the finances to build big buildings. But for the most part, I think some of that's superfluous. So anyway, would love to hear on whether that excites you or makes you a little bit worried or somewhere in between. We'll just get back to Kaleb. He's so awesome. I just loved this interview. If we were going to be problem solvers, if we were looking for a remedy, if we knew that how we do church, how we talk about church, how we present church was offensive at worst and unattractive at best, what would we have to change in the next 10 years to start being in conversation, start reintroducing people to the good side of community and service and all the things that we do value? What has to change for us to be more presentable to those outside the faith?
Yeah. If I had my extreme way, if I was going to get everything I wanted for us to do this, close the church for 3 months, close the church for 6 months, right? Have your service out in your community, go do something for somebody, right? Don't make the sermon the cornerstone piece of religious life. The sermon is a supplement to church, I believe. So I'm really going out and talking to people, getting to know the people, literally neighbors to your church and what they need. I mean, I've seen amazing things when people say, okay, we're not going to come together in this way. We're going to go to our community and we're going to have food. We're going to go to the college and we're going to connect with people and say, do you need a monthly care package from us? And if so, what are the things you would want in there? I mean, there's a million ways to do it. A personal ministry of mine that I don't think I've ever shared is I send pizza. I send money and food to college students, like regularly, like multiple times a month. So, it's as easy as just paying attention to when somebody's like, man, COVID stinks. Wish I could get some Domino's. Domino's at your door. What's your address? It's not hard. It's $15, right?
Man, every 20-year-old watching this is excited today. They just got a new source of pizza. You're welcome.
I mean, I can't do it every time. There's a limited amount, but knowing that people are in hard times and finding ways to address that, or even, people who are maybe socially awkward or lonely, like just finding meaningful, safe ways to connect with them, and making that a habit and a pattern of your life. I think that churches need to prioritize truly building relationships and them being the initiator. I mean, at their coffee shops, at their grocery stores, at their bank, wherever they are, you know. But we've adopted this mentality of, you know, invite people so they can come into our safe place, so they can come into our doors, and we have control over that environment. One of the big criticisms of Jesus is he literally would sit with tax collectors and sinners. You know, show me the pastor who's willing to go and sit with somebody who's smoking pot, right? I mean, it's not that they're not out there, but you know, the ones that I do know tend to like kind of hide that because they're embarrassed or ashamed or afraid of what their church will do. And a lot of people won't even do it. You know, they won't go to the places where people are. You know, I remember sharing a story of a guy who didn't drink, going to celebrate a birthday party at a friend's like at a bar with his friends.
Yeah.
And that internal struggle, right? Where he's like, I don't want to support what's going on here. I don't support alcohol, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But you know what I do support is my friend. And I know what my friend has been through this year, and I'm going to go and I'm going to show up for him instead of sticking my nose up at what they're doing, you know. Chose not to participate. And I think that's another thing that maybe more traditional Christians can be afraid of, is like they don't want to compromise their values. Okay. I had a lady in my church who believed that she should not have a television. And she brought that up in our Sabbath school class, and she was expecting me to fight with her because here I am, like English major, studied like fiction and pop culture in college. I didn't argue with her. I was like, hey, if you're convicted to not have a television, don't have one. Good for you. Like, proud of you for following through on your conviction. It's when you go around and try to shame other people into also not having a television that I'll start having a problem. It's not your convictions. It's what you're doing in relationship to other people. Right. And so, you know, I know Adventists that are convinced veganism is the way to go. Great. I'm not trying to get anyone to stop that. Right. What I am saying is, like, you do not know everyone's life and why they choose to live it the way that they do and the factors and pressures that they live with. And so it's very arrogant to try to put your overlay on their life instead of just being someone who is both vegan and actively present and invested in their life. You know, I think those simple, I feel like such simple concepts could go so far if we just prioritized like care for people.
Yeah, it's such a great, like, not that you do that for marketing or public relations. You do that because you actually have a heart for people. You're compelled by the supernatural love that, you know, we believe God gives you. However, there's no better marketing or PR campaign than people who love you. Who do you want to be around? People who love and accept you. Absolutely.
And who do you want to be like? You know, it's the people who show you kindness and love.
Yeah. All right. Well, wrapping up here, Kaleb, I want to give people an opportunity to see what you do, to go check out your stuff. Will you give us a little self-promo link drop time here?
Yeah. So, you know, kind of the main core big flashy thing you can go check out. You can go to www.humansofadventism.com. There's a bunch of exciting things there. We have 10-episode film series. We have stories coming out every week of just life experiences, not even devotional-based experiences of Seventh-day Adventist people. So if you've ever been curious about what a 19-year-old Seventh-day Adventist or a 70-year-old Seventh-day Adventist thinks, you know, you can read their stories. You can also check out some of the stuff I don't visibly show up on. If you go on YouTube and you search Justin Koo, last name is spelled Khoe. We have a show called I'm Listening, and I am the story editor for that show. So I take hours and hours of content and I turn it into the 30 minutes to an hour that you see when you watch that on YouTube.
Yeah, there's some great stuff you guys are doing there. I really appreciate it. All right, that's it for today. Thank you guys for sticking with it. I want to keep this conversation going. I know that a lot of you are watching from your cell phones, and like Furman has told me, he cannot type that fast on his phone. So just know I'm going to have some other audio from an interview I did with a pastor who is tired of traditional pastoring. His name is Sean Brace. He has a podcast that I'll be telling you about, I think probably this week instead of holding it till next, since it's just audio, but we'll see. Anyway, if you want to contact me, please do so through my Gmail, which is askachristian@gmail.com. I want to hear what your frustrations are with church as we are doing it traditionally. And thank you again to Kaleb Eisele for coming on and highlighting this. Thank you, Mark and Furman and all of those unnamed people out there. I cannot tell who you are. I can just see how many eyeballs are watching, but I appreciate it so much. And I hope you'll tune in next time. I do have some other fun things coming on marijuana, on abortion, and just love and sex and, all the juicy stuff that we love talking about. So the church has not done a great job talking about these from a place of understanding. And so I'm hoping to change that and start the ball rolling. And if we need to circle back and do another episode on one of these things, I hope you guys will let me know if we need to get deeper. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next week. We're now doing these on Mondays at 6. So I hope you'll join me then. Bye for now.